Well, this is a military coup. There's no doubt about it now after the head of the military told the president and vice president to resign, and then they did.
So far, Bernie Sanders is the only presidential candidate who called what happened in Bolivia a coup. Just repeated it on the stage. Do you think what happened in Bolivia is a coup?
Look, I'm on the foreign relations, and we were just talking about Zimbabwe. And literally, we have to understand, when you call something a coup, in Africa actually triggers certain things to happen. So let me just tell you what I believe in. Let's not get into semantics. That the people of Bolivia right now do not have representative government. And they deserve to have a government where they get to express their democratic ideals, where they get to participate in elections and have self-determination, which we should have in Bolivia.
Well, Mark Weisbrot from the CEPR said that it was a fair election. They disputed statistical analysis of what the OAS said.
And I think it's really terrible the way it's been presented, because from the beginning you had that OAS press release the day after the election, which hinted or implied actually very strongly that there was something wrong with the vote count. And they never presented any evidence at all. They didn't present it in that release. They didn't present it in their next release. They didn't present it in their preliminary report. And there's really nothing in this latest so-called preliminary audit that shows that there was any fraud in this election.
And I'm going to say to you right now, the principle which we should be fighting for, before arguing over semantics, the principle we should be fighting for as a country should be going against corruption. Dealing with poverty with our neighboring nations, and making sure that Latin American countries have robust access to free and fair elections, and that the democratic principles are the ones, as OAS says, the democratic principles are the ones that are paramount.
Okay, so this is very important because this has been very badly described, I think, in most of the media. You have a quick count, which is not even the official count of the election, and it's not binding. It's not it's not what determines the result. It's just something that is done while the votes are being counted to let people know what's going on at that time. And so the quick count was interrupted, and when it resumed, and it was interrupted with Evo leading by about 7 percentage points, and when it came back, his margin increased. And if you read the press here, any of the articles, it's reported as though something terribly suspicious happened. He didn't have enough votes. He needed a 10-point margin in order to, a 10-point lead over the next runner-up in order to win in the first round. And he didn't have that when the vote count, this quick count, was interrupted, or the reporting was interrupted, I should say. And then, you know, he got it in the last 16% of the votes counted. He reached 10%. But if you look at what was really, so this was reported as a very suspicious thing, and this is what's reported over and over again to make it look like something was wrong. But if you look at it, actually the whole vote count, you see there was a steady trend of Evo's margin increasing almost from the beginning, and it didn't change in the last 16%. It just continued because, and you can look at the areas that were coming in, these were rural and poor areas where Evo Morales had more support. That's all that happened. This happens in elections. You can see this if you watch election returns in the U.S.
Senator, the president has backed the interim successor of Bolivia's former president, Evo Morales. Do you also share that position, or do you, as the critics say, think it's a coup?
Well, I would, as president, listen to everyone to make a decision on that. I'm very concerned about what's going on, of course, in Bolivia and the human rights violations, what happened there. But this person who was in charge for quite a while, it does not sound like that was really an election. So that's what makes me most concerned to begin with.
But it was repeated over and over again in all the media, and so it became kind of true. And, you know,
and I would like to talk to people on the ground to figure out who we should recognize that.
If you look at the media, you don't see anybody, you don't see any experts, for example, saying that there was something wrong with the vote count. It's really just that OAS observation mission.
Again, I'm taking my information from the OAS.
Which was under a lot of pressure, of course, from Senator Rubio and the Trump administration to do this because they've wanted for some time to get rid of this government.
You don't see evidence of a coup?
What?
You don't see evidence of a coup?
I think that it's problematic what happened, the fraud that got them into office.
And so it was a military coup.
Where do you stand on Bolivia? Would you go as far as to call it a coup?
Look, there was obviously a breakdown in the political system in Bolivia. It's the end of years of dysfunction. And this, I think what you saw was a broken political system with people stepping in.
The United States should play a part as far as funding people in those coups?
I think when it comes to situations like that, we should be working with our coalition partners around the world to try and provide support for people.
Several Latin American leaders have criticized the ouster of Evo Morales in Bolivia. This is Argentina's President-elect Alberto Fernandez.
What's happening in Bolivia is that there's a dominant class that will not resign themselves to losing power to the hands of a president who is the first Bolivian president that looks like Bolivians. That's what's happening.
And British Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn tweeted Sunday to Evo Morales, who along with a powerful movement has brought so much social progress, forced from office by the military, is appalling. I condemn this coup against the Bolivian people and stand with them for democracy, social justice, and independence.
However, some of us are very concerned when it comes to foreign policy. Some of us, when it comes to foreign policy. Let's just take Bolivia, for instance. Would you call it a coup as well?
I'm going to outline some of my foreign policy principles to give you a sense of where I am. I've signed a pledge to end the forever wars. We should not be in a constant state of armed conflict, as we have been for the last 82 years. In our Constitution, it does not say that it's in the president's capacity to even declare war. It says it's an act of Congress. But Congress has ceded that responsibility to the executive branch in the last 18 years, and that's not the way it should be. If we do intervene militarily, there's a three-part test. You can call it the Yang Doctrine. Number one, there has to be a vital national interest at stake, or we can avert humanitarian catastrophe. Number two, there's a clear and defined timeline for how long our troops will be in the theater and in harm's way. And number three, there are allies and partners that are willing to join us in the mission. If those three things are in place, then I would consider military action. And that gives you a sense of how my progressive priorities apply internationally. The reason why I think we are suffering so much under President Trump, if you look at the order of operations, our strength abroad reflects how we're doing at home. We are falling apart at home. We elected a narcissist reality TV star as our president. He is now an erratic and unpredictable foreign policy leader. Our allies are looking around saying, what the heck happened to the United States? So how do we come back from this? We become stronger and more whole at home. And then we go to our partners and say, America is back. We're going to have a sustained and reliable foreign policy set of priorities that you can actually rely on over the long haul. I think it was James Mattis who said, if we invest less in diplomats, we have to invest more in ammunition. And that's not a dove, that's the former Secretary of Defense.
And there isn't any doubt about it. The media hasn't really mentioned it as much as a military coup, but it definitely is.
You wrote in a tweet that you thought it was a military coup, what happened in Bolivia. Many people have other point of view. They think that Evo Morales had been in power 14 years, that he wanted to fight more, and that he wanted to become a dictator. So what do you think?
No, I don't agree with that assertion. I think Morales did a very good job in alleviating poverty, in giving the indigenous people of Bolivia a voice that they never had before. Now, we can argue about his going for a fourth term, whether that was a wise thing to do.
And the OAS thought it was a fraud, the election on October the 20th.
Some people think that as well. But at the end of the day, it was the military who intervened in that process and asked them to leave. When the military intervenes, Jorge, in my view, that's called a coup.
Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you all.